Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is David, and we are going to talk about the Continental Season 1 Episode 2. It is called Loyalty to the Master. So, spoilers for the episode. We left off last episode with the death of Frankie. Winston seemingly going to be ready to maybe mount some kind of revenge or offense against Cormac, who's behind the whole thing.
Saying by far the most badass line that definitely wasn't being cribbed from anything else.
How dare you start us on a malicious note.
To be fair, I watched the recap just to make sure I remembered everything, and they specifically ended the recap on that note. They want you to remember that.
Yes, and it annoyed me again. They made the effort. They went out of their way to make me remember it, so I'd be upset again. So, yeah, I don't know about you, David, but I was pretty bored throughout this episode.
I got kind of excited about halfway through, and then I was let down. And yes, it's amazing how boring a show that is based off of John Wick, of all things, can be.
I think last episode I was just kind of mapping out, just because we were talking about how, like, okay, how many action sequences can they do, and we were saying, oh, they'll probably have this and then that. I think we said, oh, they'll probably just have one for episode 2, and then they'll save their biggest thing for episode 3. That was overstating it, apparently, because episode 2 didn't have any action sequences. Not really. Okay, there was one okay fight from Lou, the sister of the gunrunner pair. She has like a little martial arts fight outside of shop, which, to be fair, you know what, this is one of the few positives I'll say, is that I think, as far as like comparing it to martial arts movies and how she looked when she was fighting, it actually looked pretty solid.
Oh yeah, no, straight up, she had the whole Bruce Lee thing going on.
Yeah, which is not what I think of when I think of John Wick, but on its own terms, that was a solid little thing for about 30 seconds, and that's about it. It was
there was also a theater fight with Yen, and I say fight very liberally.
Yeah,
there.
Fight's a bit of a stretch on that. It's more just they sprung a couple of booby traps and she stabbed one guy with like a.
But it was like the most brutal scene outside of like the very end of the episode. It was something that I felt was needed to wake the audience up, because at that point I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do other things now.
Well, especially since not only is John Wick known for all of its action scenes tend to be quite lengthy. They're kind of known for being these sprawling things where the fights will go through a location, or, you know, you think of them as these big set pieces that encompass a good few minutes with the kind of a journey, and that only got bigger and bigger as the movies went on. Here, a quick snippet of violence for 20 seconds is not really feeling like it's part of that lineage. And instead, this episode is largely everyone kind of just like, okay, we're going to storm the Continental, and they're planning for that, so they've not done it yet. They're just kind of like, okay, getting some people involved, getting some weapons that they need, things like that. I have to say, the decision to do this just didn't feel as big as it should. Like, the idea of, like, we're going to take on the Continental and kill the guy who runs it, that feels like it should feel like the biggest thing ever, and it just kind of feels small here.
There's this whole thing where, like, Winston comes up and he tells the little group of gunrunners, hey, we're gonna go get revenge. We're gonna storm the Continental. And they argue with them for maybe 20 seconds before they're like, all right, well, if you're gonna do it, here's all the things we're gonna need. Instead, I felt like it should have been this whole thing where everyone's like, you don't get it. You're asking the impossible here. This isn't going to work. But instead, it just seems like, I mean, I guess we could do it if we were a little bit prepared. Sure, why not?
Yes, and they just kind of gloss over the fact that the building could very well literally be full of assassins who are all very well trained. It barely is mentioned or brought up, and instead we spend time this episode just doing really generic TV things, like here's a flashback to how Frankie met Yen, and like the idea that she was a suicide bomber who she doesn't even choose not to go through with it. She actually tries to press the trigger and it just doesn't go off, and then she meets Frankie and it's like, it's a miracle, love found a way or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't honestly, for that.
Honestly, I said last episode that I was actually pretty fond of the soundtrack choices. And in this episode, equally, I like the choices of song, but it was really getting to me how there was barely a moment in this entire episode where there wasn't some song playing, whether that
constant.
be in the scene
Yeah.
or like either in the scene or just for the audience. There was always something playing, and it got a bit old.
And some of, obviously there's a lot of popular stuff. I recognize most of them. There's a couple I wasn't as familiar with, but most of them, you kind of hear the first couple of notes and you realize, oh, I know what song this is about to kick in.
Yeah.
So
there was a review I watched a while back about the 2016 Suicide Squad movie, and they particularly made fun of the intro because it was just a grab bag of a bunch of songs, but it was always just like exactly what was going on in the scene. Like there was no subtlety to it at all. It was just, here's exactly what's happening and we're playing a song to match. I felt that here. This felt like, oh yeah, we're talking about how Frankie died and how Yen feels about it. Here's a bunch of songs about loss, and I think it's Can't Live Without Your Love is the song that's playing. Like it's so on the nose, it almost gets a bit annoying at times.
Yeah, I definitely felt that. I mean, credit. I mean, we've got like a deranged Scottish villain henchman character. There was a track in this by a Scottish musician, so I mean, they're keeping the trends going. That was Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty.
Oh yeah, he's Scottish.
He's Scottish, yeah.
I just associate that with like literally the setting of this movie, just 70s New York.
It doesn't necessarily sound Scottish, but it just happens to be a Scottish composer, yeah.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, because it's got a very... Because you don't think of, like, saxophone when you think of Scotland.
No, not at all. I'd love to hear the bagpipe version, though. That's...
Do you know what? It probably exists. Someone's probably done it at some point.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Deep in the bowels of YouTube. Just search it out.
Yeah, and even the stuff that I kind of liked. So, I mean, we'll probably go through the characters more than anything, just because it's the easiest way to break this up. But the thing we probably liked the most in the first episode was KD's story, because it was like, okay, a regular person who doesn't know about this world poking into that world. And I felt like all of her stuff in this episode was like, it kind of pivoted to she's just trying to investigate who Frankie was. So it wasn't interesting anymore because it wasn't investigating the world of the Continental. It was just trying to investigate where the body went, because at the start of the episode, Winston and Co. get the body and cremate it. So they're giving me send-off because they don't want anyone asking questions. So her episode here is questioning the guy at the morgue and has kind of a crappy sort of interrogation type scene. And then talking to the cop that she's having an affair with right outside the door where his wife is, and having...
Well, see, it bothered me even more with that because they do that twice. They have him come to her saying, hey, don't investigate this. And then she comes to him saying, hey, I'm going to investigate this. It's just the same scene twice, and we don't get any forward progress on her entire plot.
No, we do not. And the only thing we really get out of any of this episode is that it took... Not that he was necessarily likable in the first episode, but the guy she's having the affair with goes firmly into just, oh no, he's kind of a shitbag, because the way he talks to her, the way he tries to talk down to her, the way he tries to flirt with her even when his wife's like right there. And then the fact that he breaks into her place looking for whatever stuff she's got. And apparently the little box she has with her evidence in it lights up with the case from Pulp Fiction. Because, I mean, I'm sure it was just meant to be a reflection, because it was like a metal case, so I'm sure it was just meant to be the reflection of the metal lid. But it gave me some of that Pulp Fiction, kind of the soul of Marcellus Wallace kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a MacGuffin for her plot of, I've got your box with your secrets. And we're gonna wait to see what's in it.
But the problem is, though, is we're 2/3 into this. We've only got one episode left, and I feel like her entire plot now, even if it has a cool ending, like this has all been all the stuff in this middle episode is just boring, dull, and worthless. It's just time killing.
Yeah, last episode I posited that like she would get involved with Winston and like work to take down Cormac to some extent. But honestly, I feel like her entire plot's gonna wrap up with her finally going into the Continental, and then now Winston's in charge, and she's just going to be like, oh, well, okay, I've got my eye on you, and that's going to be something that they would hit on maybe in season 2, but I doubt we're going to get that far.
Yeah, if such a season 2 ever even comes to fruition, which is questionable. I think, because one of my big things with episode 1 was like, is it even worth doing a TV show tied to John Wick if you can't bring the one thing that matters from John Wick, and that is the style and the action? And in episode 1, I felt how like little they could do with that relative to the runtime of the episode. But episode 2 is like full in the other. It's fully just TV stuff. There's nothing in this felt like John Wick in terms of style, in terms of the action. Even things that felt it should have been a big deal didn't end up feeling like a big deal. So there's a plot line in here that ties to Sharon, but we find out that the cellist who's like there playing music in the Continental is friends with Sharon. I was even thinking it might be implying a gay romance.
Same.
Yeah, just from the way they were talking, I was getting that vibe. And later on, Cormac, Mel Gibson, because this cellist tried to ask Sharon to leave with him to go to Ireland, because that's where he's got a scholarship to go to some fancy music conservative.
The conservatory.
Yeah. He bashes his head in with a golf club, right? Which you can see coming from the start of the scene, right? He's playing nice with him, but you can tell that he's going to go mad and kill him. And that's all fine. But as he was doing it, I was thinking, he's just killing someone in the Continental. And it does get addressed, because it cuts to Lena Luthor, and she's like, oh, he's just killed someone in Continental grounds. Don't tell anyone, because I want all this to play out. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad you at least brought it up. But even as it was happening, I'm like, in the John Wick movies, when someone finally killed someone in Continental grounds, it felt like you could hear a pin drop. Like the entire world paused, and it was like the most shocking thing ever. And they built to it, and it felt like a big deal. And here it feels nothing, especially since we didn't even talk about this in episode 1, but in the action scene at the start of episode 1, when Frankie's going through the building, this red light comes on basically saying killing has been authorized on Continental grounds. And I'm like, okay, that feels like, especially since in this episode they basically say that's just a button that Mel Gibson has on his desk where he can just hit that when he wants. And I'm like,
it's just the presidential nuclear football. You just press the button and then all of a sudden everything goes to hell.
And it just kind of feels like it diminishes like how strong that rule was in the movie. Like they're willing to just like write any excuse to ignore it in this show, which means that it just doesn't feel like they're being true to what the movies were in that sense either. So I don't know.
I agree. I wonder, I'm thinking back to the end of, I think it was John Wick 3, when there was like the siege on the Continental and killing was then. I don't remember them pressing a big red button there, but then again, I think at that point it was also deconsecrated.
Yeah,
so,
it was basically, it wasn't officially part of the world anymore,
right.
So it was like, okay, now it's all fair game.
I guess we didn't need the big red button, but you're right in that having a button that just says the rule can be overridden seems cheap. It just cheapens the idea of the sanctity of these rules. And then add on top of that when the rule is broken without the button being pressed, the adjudicator is just like, well, we've only got one more episode. We'll deal with it then.
Pretty much.
It's not. Yeah, it doesn't feel like there is any consequence. Like you said, the pin drop moment wasn't there. If anything, it was much more of, they wanted to shock you so much with the brutality of the death, because they do show like the blood and gore of it. It is a very brutal kill, but they hit you so hard over the head with that, pun intended, that it's not, you're not even thinking about the fact that the rule has been broken until it cuts to the adjudicator and they say, by the way, he just broke the rule.
Well, I thought of it because I was what I was thinking about during the head bashing. But
I mean, that's fair.
Maybe that's just me. But no, I agree that it's not focusing on the right thing. And your pun wasn't even as bad as the one Mel Gibson actually drops.
That's right.
When Sharon comes in and he says, "What was it? Was it something about the pin? I lost my pen. No, I went off."
No, I was pretty teed off.
That's what it was. Teed off. He was teed off. Jesus,
God, that was
Jesus. I mean, Mel Gibson sold it like a champ, I suppose, but it's and I think that's my other problem with this whole thing is that this character, like, I'm sure he was in some scenes in the background last episode, but he was never properly introduced until this one scene in this episode where he's talking to Sharon, and it feels like such a just easy, convenient thing that's going to convince Sharon to ultimately work with Winston. And I know at the end here, after Winston makes his case to him that he should like turn against Cormac, it seems like it seems like Sharon goes to Cormac and tells him, "Hey, they've got a plan. They're coming for you, but I'm loyal and I'm making this choice." Like, honestly, the entire time he was saying this, I'm like, this is part of the plan. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, this is part of the plan. Part of the plan is to make him think that you're still on his side and tell him that they're coming. This is the bluff. This is the double bluff even. This is the gambit.
If he had come into the room and started saying, "Hey, Winston contacted me," and all this, and then he saw the dead body of his lover/friend, I could question it whether or not that was part of the plan. But because he only started sharing the plan after he saw the body, there's no doubt in my mind that it's all part of Winston's larger scheme.
And
No
his
doubt.
friend having his head bashed in is obviously obviously he might have been teetering on it and considering and whatnot, but seeing what he's done to his friend, it's like, okay, no, I'm taking you down. I'm helping them take you down.
Right.
And that's all fine. And it's fine to compare Winston's backstory to Sharon because Cormac sort of gave both of them like a place and a life when they had nothing, and that's what he's touching on.
So yeah, this one finally goes into what happened with Winston's like childhood in relating to the black and white scene we got at the beginning of episode 1. They're finally expanding on that a bit. And then B, how is it that they were related to Cormac's entire organization? And basically they just went around and picked up the bribe payments, like the blackmail payments from everyone in town. And then one day Winston got the idea that they should be shaving some money off the top to make some on the side.
Because he's the businessman, he's the entrepreneur of the pair.
Of course. And so then Cormac brought them in and basically spooked the hell out of them and said, hey, don't be stealing from me anymore. And in order to show that he is a quote-unquote good guy to them, he buys Winston a new pair of shoes. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm much more intrigued by the black and white scenes because the other thing that we see is that what gets them landed in a police off like a precinct is they throw a Molotov cocktail in through a window. I guess they thought it was empty, but then people start screaming.
Yeah, I thought that scene was really bad because it felt really just. I don't know, I didn't feel much tension from it or anything like that. And then once the Molotov was thrown in and you hear people screaming, I actually kind of let out a little laugh when Winston started crying because he was like, there's people in there. I'm like, when you throw a Molotov cocktail into a window and you don't want to hurt people, you might want to make sure that there's not innocent people inside.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like, I don't know what was said to Winston and it even seemed like his brother, it seemed like Frankie also was unaware there'd be people there. What was going to be, I'm sure we'll get to it, but what was said of, oh, by the way, I need you to burn down this building, but don't go inside of it. Don't set the fire on the ground floor. You have to throw in a cocktail. That's the only way it's going to work.
I'm assuming this is basically supposed to thematically tie in to the other subplot. Well, I like the kung fu fight or karate fight at the end of it. The subplot where the Asian kid is throwing a brick through the window of the dojo and like the new Asian crime boss is like got problems with them. And when Lou goes to see him towards the end, he's basically, yeah, your dad had like a deal with the old boss, and that's all fine, but I'm different. And also, dojo's a Japanese word, so you should be using the correct terminology. I'm like, well, no, because if it's teaching karate, it should be a dojo because it's a karate dojo. That's the point.
I mean, yes, but here's the thing. I could not care less about this plot.
I couldn't give a shit either. It was every time it cut to something, and this was the problem, is that there was, I realized at a certain point in this episode that I feel this way about every plot, is that every time it cut to a scene in a different plot line, I went, oh, this plot, oh no, this one, and I realized I was doing that for every single plot.
That's fair. I mean, I was definitely on most of the plots like that, but this one more so than all the others, because every time they cut back to, I want to say the Gunrunners plot, but even then they split off into two separate things. So specifically the dojo plot, it's just like, I'm not introduced into who this new gang leader is. I don't know what the old deal was with the father. They start trying to explain it, but it's all just telling me. It's not showing me. It's not giving me any context as to why it's important to the overall plan of things. And I can't find any reason to care. It just has not given me a single one.
There's too many characters with too many characters with their own plot threads, I guess, as we'll say. And they should really, if they've only got 3 episodes, which is effectively a little mini trilogy, they should be focusing on the one thing that they want to do well and make us care about and make that work. Everything else should be secondary. And it feels like they're trying to juggle all these plot threads. And it almost feels like they're doing this because they're hoping that any of these characters can all be back for a season 2 or even spin off into their own shows or whatever it may be. Like, that's what they're hoping for. And all of them are just kind of a bit dull. Even when they try to do something emotional, like there's a well acted scene between Miles, the brother of the gunrunners, and Yen when they're about to like go pick up like a van, and they're waiting in their van before they get the other one, and it all builds up to her thanking him for helping Frankie get her into the US and stuff. But he's talking about Muhammad Ali and his greatest fight, which was fighting the US government for speaking out against Vietnam. And then he talks about this final fight that they were in Vietnam and how him and Frankie cried because like the war was finally over. And it's well performed. Like I think both actors do a good job, but I still kind of sat there finding myself just being like this just feels like you're trying to make me care with an emotional scene, but you've not really done enough to build up these characters in the context that they're in for me to be invested in their story. It's kind of a well acted scene, but it feels like it's in a vacuum because everything else setting up her relationship with Frankie and his relationship with Miles all just kind of feels, I don't know, short changed, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said it best there, is that it feels like it exists in a vacuum. Honest to God, I could see that monologue being said in like a high school drama class at some point. Like it just feels like it exists solely of, nope, we've separated this out from everything so you can just watch this scene and say how good we are. We are so good at writing things.
And, you know, like, Yen's a more interesting character than most of them, but all of her thing really sums up to here is that, okay, people are going to keep coming looking for this coin press thing, so I'm going to team up with the others to take down the Continental. But she doesn't like Winston very much because she blames him for everything. Yeah. Even though Frankie's the one who stole the damn coin press, though, so it's a bit of a stretch. But I mean,
she blames the whole group of being angry at them, but Winston most of all, of course, because he's the one who wants to keep on pressing it. I guess, should we even talk about the new sniper guy?
Oh, we have to, yeah. So, Miles and Lou's father's old friend is this old sniper with a Southern accent, or maybe more of a...
I couldn't even tell you, man.
It was a strong accent, whatever it was. But he's a sniper whose eyesight's starting to go, and he misses a shot. We see him sort of try to assassinate someone, and he gets it eventually, but he misses a shot. And then Lou comes to speak to him and recruits him by the end of the scene, and then he's just there at the meetings afterwards. It's not very exciting.
No.
I think the problem is that everything just plays out exactly as it needs to for the things to progress. It's just Lou goes to talk him into coming, and they do this little thing where the old man feels like he's been played into accepting this, like Lou presented it. But the problem is, this wasn't a scene from Better Call Saul where Saul like meticulously and entertainingly tricked the other person into believing they were making a choice. This was the sort of thing where he kind of does it, but it's not very entertaining or engaging. And then you only kind of get the trickery because at the end, the old man's like, wait, did you just play me? And I'm like, I guess he did, but like I didn't have fun with it.
I mean, to give it's just one level of reverse psychology. The old guy's saying like, oh, there's no way you could take on the entire Continental, and he's like, you're right, and that's why I'm specifically not asking you. And he's like, well, I won't accept that. I have to be included now.
So then he's just on the team, and it's like, okay, we've introduced, there's not a lot of new characters introduced in this one, but this is still a new character on top of all the ones we already had from episode 1, and there's just too many of them to give any of them enough meat to really care about them or make them interesting.
Well, I guess that leads to the one part that I was actually kind of excited for. And that is, while Miles was going out and getting the sniper guy, Winston was told about the Bowery. He was told about how there's the homeless community, and they stand as an army that is independent of Cormac, and they're at odds with each other, but like neither can wipe out the other. So Winston wants to go and see what that's all about. I was so excited for this because like I'm here for the lore. That's what I want. I want the expansion on the things that were not completely explained in John Wick.
Well, let me ask you this, David. Do you feel after these scenes that the Bowery took place, did you feel that you learned anything new or got an expansion of the Bowery lore, if I could speak properly?
No.
Did you get any new details? Anything interesting other than just the fact that a woman ran this place before Lawrence Fishburne? That's it.
That's the thing. Before Lawrence Fishburne showed up, there was a woman, and she did give mild explanation of like it's not from the way that we saw the Bowery in the films, it felt a lot more like a spy network than it did an actual force to it, like it had firepower behind it. This one does show that no, they are capable of like holding their own and having these complex maneuvers to take out like Cormac's men as they were following Winston. So there is a little bit there, but it does not go anywhere near as much into the lore as I would have hoped. It doesn't say like, where did this group even come from? How did they start to get assembled? We just say, no, they're here because I treat them like they're good people. It's like, oh, great. Glad we could have that. And even then, by the end of the episode, they're not on board. I'm sure they will be by the time we hit like end of first act of episode 3. But it's just this thing where we're holding off on them because we want it to still seem hopeless.
Do you know what? I'm not convinced they even will show up in the next episode. Like, they probably will, but it wouldn't surprise me if they don't, and that this just attempt to bring them in on it was just an excuse to show the Bowery in this time period, because we have to connect to everything we know about from the movies.
That's fair. I'll give you even better odds, though. You predicted last time that Miles was going to become the Bowery King. I think this episode has done nothing to further that, so I will say even more credit to you if it ends up being true.
I mean, I'm not convinced it will. It was purely just because when they introduced them, there was pigeons at the start of the scene. That was the only thing I was going on.
And as the series progresses, the less I think that they're putting any thought into this imagery.
I mean, yeah, like they could just do a thing where, let's say they are in the next episode and the Bowery Queen dies or something, and like some young, probably 18-year-old at this point in time comes up and like like says something nice to her, and she's like, "You take over the Bowery, King," and we just meant to get that that's Lawrence Fishburne. Wow. It'll be something stupid like that.
I mean, absolutely. They're gonna say something that's just like, and make sure you're as big as humanly possible with everything you do.
Oh dear. Yeah.
So one little reference here that I think they really wanted to like punch out. They really wanted to make a big deal, but I'm not sure what they're gonna do with it. Is as Lou is leaving the place where she's meeting up with the Asian crime lord, he says the boogeyman is coming.
Well, this was at least set up in the dialogue. There was context for it because she said that chicken's feet used to be hung on the doors to keep the boogeyman away. And he says at the end of the scene, better hang that chicken feet up because the boogeyman is coming. This didn't, obviously as a kind of a, a wink wink, like the boogeyman was referenced in John Wick, but at least here, the boogeyman as a concept, as a thing in the 70s, it's a general concept that's used. This does not bother me as much as a specific phrase that is used later. Now, if he sends someone that he actually refers to as the boogeyman next episode, I'll have a problem with that, because then you're just straight up saying, hey, there's an assassin that we call the boogeyman.
Here's the thing, I brought it up because I am genuinely worried that we're going to get like 18-year-old John Wick who has already gotten training. Like, I'm worried about that. I'm not sure it's the case. I think he might be too young.
Yeah, I think he's too young, because if you take Keanu's age as like sort of John Wick's age, roughly, we'll put it this way: he was playing teenagers in 1989 in Bill and Ted.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, like even if he's a little bit older than that, because typically you're older playing a teenager, he would still be in his at most pre-teens, if not younger than that. So
that's fair. Yeah.
Then again, if we get a young long-haired kid who's like 9 years old, who's really good with a silencer, then
just always dressed in suits.
Yes.
Petting a dog.
I mean, that would be a very funny thing to talk about if they do that. It wouldn't be good. It'd be terrible, in fact.
Not at all. But that would be at least a 15-minute segment of like, how in the hell do they have the balls?
Oh dear.
I'm checking the John Wick wiki, which I'm disappointed is not called the John Wiki, and I don't see a birth year on here. Oh wait, there it is. 1964. He was born.
Yeah, so he'd be, I don't know what year this is exactly, but it'd be what, maybe 10?
He'd be like 10 tops 15, which seems too young. Yeah. So that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Is there anything else you want to talk about from the episode?
The only other thing that was of any major note is the scene where the adjudicator first shows up to talk to Cormac.
Yeah, and says you've got 3 days to find the coin press or you're done, basically.
Yep. But they do this thing where, because she's wearing this porcelain, like, half mask, as she's sitting down across from Cormac, who's eating a meal, she takes it off, and there's this deep music sting, as if we just saw the face of the devil itself.
Yeah, we don't see it, of course. Yeah, we
no.
It's hidden from us. And there's an implication from a line he says afterwards that there is something wrong with her face, like some scar, maybe her mouth's like half missing or something. Who knows?
I was fully expecting like just vertically split Two-Face instead of horizontally, just completely removed. But yeah, I'm curious if we're gonna get payoff on that. It seems like the sort of thing that they're just gonna say, "Oh no, it's horrible. Trust us. You don't want to see it," rather than actually ever showing us.
Yeah. There's a whole sequence where the guys at the junkyard, like there's a guy and his son, have to hide as the twins and the bad guys are all looking for the coin press.
I thought for sure we were going to get more development on the twins because they were kind of just thrown in right at the end of the last episode. And then all we got from them this episode is tossing the trailer and then Mel Gibson yelling at them saying that they weren't good enough. I don't think we're going to get anything else on these guys.
I don't think so. There'll be an action scene next episode and that'll be it, probably.
Oh, yeah, no. The girl is going to get shot or stabbed first, and then the guy's going to get super pissed off and then also shot or stabbed. I'm calling that one. I think they do not make it out.
I think it could be easily the other way around, but I think the general premise of what you just said is actually exactly what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It could be swapped. Who goes first? I don't think it matters either way.
Nope.
But I think that is what's going to happen.
Yep. I mean, yeah, beyond that, there's not much more to it. Obviously, like we said, there's this plot where Winston basically kidnaps Sharon and tells him, hey, please be a part of my plan. And we don't see him answer that, so there's no guarantee that he did say yes, but obviously he said yes. And it just kind of ends as soon as Sharon reveals that there's a plan, which doesn't feel like there's been any forward progress. It doesn't feel like Winston has built his army. It doesn't feel like any major moves have been made by either side. The only thing that we get now is a 3-day time limit. And that's just telling us that, hey, this is going to be wrapped up in the last episode, which, yeah, I'd hope so.
Oh, watch them have a cliffhanger. Watch them assume they're going to get a second season and have a cliffhanger.
I don't think the Winston Cormac plot will, but I could definitely see the detective plot ending on a cliffhanger, and that will piss me off all the more.
Oh well, there's the thoughts on episode 2 of the Continental. The first one was rough and definitely a mixed bag. I think the second one is all the weak parts of the first episode with none of the strengths, pretty much.
Yep.
So really, really dull. If this was like a 10 episode or an 8 episode show, this is where I'd say we're not going to do the rest of it. But there's only one episode left, so we might as well finish it and see how it ends. So we'll look at it next week. And then I can
cancel Peacock. Thank God.
You can cut off the cock.
I was meeting with my family yesterday, and I told them, like, oh yeah, so by the way, we got Peacock. And my dad misheard me. He's like, you got a Peacock? I was like, no, Dad. It's a streaming service. I know it's a stupid named one, but it's a streaming service.
Oh dear. Well, I'm glad that's where that went. I thought you were going to say the subject of cutting off cock came up with my family and discussions were had.
No, we saved that for holidays.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. That's Thanksgiving. Never understood that American holiday. And
we just celebrate that we killed a bunch of natives and we cut off their dicks.
On that note, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. You can, of course, support all the content by simply hitting the like button. But, of course, you could do more, go above and beyond, being over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us over there on a monthly basis and help keep all the content coming and get some bonuses for your trouble. But that is us, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?